Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I'm going to modify a tool. Not long ago, I was working on a project and I needed to cut and remove some stitches. And I had a few of you like, that looks dangerous. You know, I was using my knife and picking at the threads. And I actually had a very generous offer from one of my viewers out there. He had actually purchased a belt from me, and he sent me an email and he says, I'd like to gift you a stitch ripper. And I looked a little bit for one. I'd always kind of kept my eyes open for a stitch ripper, but I don't use it that often, and I realized that if I injure my hand, then it's well worth whatever the cost of the stitch ripper is. I get that and understand that. But I got looking, and the only one I found was a Ron's Tool edger. And I don't have a problem spending money on Ron's tools. You guys have seen me buy those before. That's my favorite roundover tool. But I wasn't going to spend somebody else's money on something that I thought was too expensive for me to pay for based off of how often I use it. So where I'm going with that is I was in Tandy not long ago, and I grabbed this tool here. I'm going to modify this into a stitch ripper. Let's see how this works out. I think it'll work out good. Time will tell. Let's get over here on the workbench and we'll get started on that. Appreciate you being here in my shop today. So I purchased this. It was on sale. I'm thinking it was like $10 after the sale. So it's worth seeing if I can modify this into a stitch ripper. And let me get a piece of paper and I'll sketch out what the stitch ripper looks like on Ron's site. I'll draw a little bit larger for you so it's easy to see. But the tool that Ron has on his site comes out to a point on two sides like this. And then it's pretty much sharp here to a point, but it comes back into a V like this. And then this is all sharp here and here, so that when you shove that in there, it'll cut the stitches as it gets to here. So that's what I think I'm going to do. The side profile of it would be, I think it's fairly slender, that it comes down to a point like that. All right, and then that groove is right there. So I thought it would be pretty easy to modify this. What I need to do is to file and remove most of this area here on the edge of this French skiver. So that'll be the first thing I do, is to remove that. And I'll get started. I'll just go over here on the grinding wheel and I'm going to take quite a bit of this off. I'm not going to get all the way down to here. I'll do that by hand as I get closer. So I'll be right back. As you can see, I removed quite a bit of that lip there. There's a little bit left there. I'll probably take this down more, but I can do that with some sandpaper so that I have a nice polished edge. So the next thing I need to do is start to create the V shape here. And I have a triangular file here. So I'm going to start with that here. Off to one side a little bit. That looks pretty well. Yep, that's centered. And in looking at the one that I saw online, it looked like the bevel was mainly on the top, that the bottom was flat. So that's what I'm working on here. I'm going to push that way a little bit, this direction, because it looks like I'm slightly off. So I'll just a little more pressure that direction. Clean this up a little bit so I can get a better idea of what it looks like. see I've got a bevel going on this side here, not this one after I had pushed that over a little bit, so I need to work on that bevel there a little bit. So some may ask, is it worth it to, modify tools? And I would venture to say, talk to, an experienced leather crafter, and they're modifying tools probably pretty often, especially in the stamping tools. Maybe they want it a little narrower, or they want to remove a feature on there, or they don't want it quite as textured, and so they're modifying those tools on a regular basis. And if my job was mainly repairing leather goods, especially tack, then I'd go buy one of Ron's tools, and because I'm sure that it's going to be worth the money paid for it for someone that's working with it every day. But if I removed stitches 10 times last year, then that's a bunch. I'll take a look here real quick and see where we're at. I'm a little bit off center. The thread's not going to know that when I go to cut it. It's sharp down in here, not as sharp up here. I'm going to polish this a little bit further. Grab some finer sandpaper here. Kind of a big step from 120 to 320, but here I am. I'm going to take a quick break while I'm working on this tool. I wanted to do a shout out here. This week, my wife and I was contacted by a fellow leather artisan here in the Phoenix area, and he said he wanted to show me his laser equipment that he uses. I think he uses it primarily on wood and leather, but he makes hat patches, and he made this hat for me. Isn't that just cool? I think it turned out really good. And you'll see me wearing that in future videos. I would have worn it today, but then I'd have to take it off, and you'd see why I wear a hat most of the time. But it's just a cool hat, and it's Brian. And Brian, if you want people to know how to get a hold of you, put something in the comment section, and I'll pin that so it's the top comment and people can see in there. But he has a business. He has a very nice laser, and he creates leather patches for people. So I'm assuming that if you had a project where maybe you wanted to do a leather patch on some, journals or whatever, that you could reach out to Brian and he could hook you up there. But we went down there, we spent quite a bit of time with him, and he is well versed in hobbies. I'm not sure if he has Leathercraft as a hobby, or I don't know if you remember back a ways, I said that my dad's favorite hobby was collecting hobbies, I think, because it seemed like he would be on one for 18 months or a year, and then he'd be off onto something else, and then we'd recycle those, and I tend to do a little bit of that as well. But Brian, just a really nice guy, and he made this hat as a gift for me. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a shout out there, Brian. But as I said, if you want people to know how to get a hold of you, then put something in the comment section. And his laser, it's really cool. I've seen videos of people with lasers. I've toyed with the idea of it. As I get ready to load up and move stuff to cooler weather, I'm like, one more thing to move. So I'm not sure it's for me, but I'm going to give it some thought. So back to the tool. I'm not sure how pointed I want here. I don't want it to dig in, but I want it to be able to, divide the two layers as I'm getting at the threads as well. Curious how sharp it is. It's pretty sharp. We've got a little ways to go yet though. I'm slow to learn at times. Not sure exactly how sharp it really needs to be when you think about the fact that the leather's holding the stitch in place, but I'm thinking sharper's probably better than not. Let's see if it's sharper now. Yep, I mean, it's not perfect, but like I said, I use it so infrequently. And these tips, they're not overly sharp, and the profile's pretty good for getting between the layers. I left plenty of meat in there in case you want to pry on the leather. I can always thin this down some. You know, I think that's going to work. That is safer than getting in there with a sharp knife and picking and maybe towards your hand. And yeah, let's turn the camera around here for a second. Well, there you go. Let me know what you think. Look, if I was a saddle shop and I was repairing equipment or tools on a regular basis and I needed to remove stitches, not even daily, but if I was doing that weekly, then I wouldn't think twice about spending the money to buy one of the tools from Ron's Tools. Toby's the owner there. I know him, and I'm sure he would agree with me too. But if I've removed stitches 10 times in the last year, I don't even think that, 10 times in the last 2 years, then I'm not sure it's worth spending the money to buy that. And I did. That was a really generous offer from one of my viewers to gift me that tool. And hopefully I didn't hurt his feelings by saying, look, I'm not going to spend your money that way. So I just modified this tool. And I think I paid $10 or $11 from Tandy for this tool and modified it. They didn't have a stitch ripper. I'm thinking about toying with the idea of cutting a notch in here as well to sharpen, so that if you are going to maybe go in and hook a thread and pull on it to cut it out. But I think the push is a good way, and I thought that that French skiver was already kind of a mile in the right direction instead of taking some round stock and modifying it. And I worked really hard to keep it cool while I was doing this so I wouldn't ruin the temper. I'm not sure how hardened their tools are anyway, but there we are. But I see people modify tools on a regular basis. It's nothing new, but I encourage you to think about that. I've thought 3 or 4 times, I haven't done it yet, but this vertical thumbprint from Barry King, when I'm doing the basket stamp on the leather, this rounded heel on it, I have to do more stamps so that I don't show all that rounded, detail on the back of there. They make one that goes around a flower center. It's actually, instead of, let's see if I get this right, instead of convex, it's concave. They make one the other way, but I would need to modify that too. But I would just take a file and just file that off and polish it up some and use it that way. But I use it on floral. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Maybe I'll find a used tool or something, because I think this is it's like a $35 tool. Anyway, just a fun video today. Think about the tools you've got, how you would modify them and make them better. And I don't know if you can see me, but I am sweating. It is time to head out of the desert for the summer, that's for sure. I appreciate you following along on this fun little video here. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.